The phone rings. It's the same one you thought you'd put behind you. That call, that voice, the one you couldn't shake. The one that promised to never let you go. You ignored the warnings, brushed off the fear, but the whispers follow you now. Every time you close your eyes, they're there. Every dark corner, every strange sound is a reminder. This is not a game. You open the door, and now they're coming. No matter where you run, no matter what you do, you're never alone. They've been waiting, and you can't escape. The glow of Sarah's laptop was the only light in her otherwise dark room. The late-night silence felt suffocating, as if the world had pressed pause, leaving her in this small, isolated bubble. She had always been intrigued by the depths of the internet, the dark, forgotten corners where secrets and shadows lurked. Tonight, as she mindlessly clicked from one obscure site to the next, something caught her attention. An article with a chilling headline, "The Faces of the Missing, Real-Time Disappearances." It was one of those articles that promised to unveil something disturbing, yet undeniably intriguing. The kind of article you knew you shouldn't click on, but did anyway, driven by that unbearable curiosity. With a slight shiver running through her body, Sarah clicked the link, her breath caught in her throat. What she saw when the page loaded left her both stunned and unsettled. The web page was bare, with only a few distorted images scattered across the screen. Faces, mostly blurry and out of focus, seemed to be staring back at her from every angle. There were no captions, no names, only eerie descriptions that sounded like something straight out of a crime thriller. They were listed simply as Victim 1, Victim 2, and so on, each face more unsettling than the last. Sarah felt her fingers tremble as she scrolled down, almost against her will, her eyes glued to the screen. She couldn't help herself. It was like a magnetic force was drawing her deeper into the dark abyss of this website. The images grew more disturbing with each click, fuzzy, pixelated faces that seemed to be staring right into her soul, their expressions frozen in a permanent state of fear or shock. A shiver ran down her spine, and she felt an unfamiliar, creeping sense of unease rising in her chest. Her mind tried to rationalize what she was seeing. It's just a website, she told herself. These could be stock photos, actors posing for some weird online project. Or it's probably just an internet hoax. Nothing to worry about. But even as the logical side of her brain tried to dismiss it, something about the images felt all too real, all too raw. Her finger hovered over the mouse, ready to click away, but something stopped her, something she couldn't explain. One of the faces seemed to call to her. She leaned in closer, squinting at the blurry image, trying to make out any identifying features. There was something oddly familiar about it, but she couldn't quite place it. The person looked too familiar. Her heart rate picked up as a sense of unease settled in. She felt as though she was being watched, as if there was someone, or something, waiting for her to uncover something terrible. The more she stared at the face, the more she felt an overwhelming, bone-deep fear crawling under her skin. No, she thought, this is crazy. It's just a coincidence. But the feeling wouldn't go away. It only intensified. Her eyes flitted nervously to the corner of the screen, where a small pop-up notification appeared. "Would you like to view more?" it asked, the words themselves almost too calm. What? Sarah hesitated. She was already in too deep. What was the harm in clicking just one more link? Just one more, she whispered to herself, and before she could even register what she was doing, her finger clicked on the link. The screen flickered for a moment, and then a new image loaded. This one was different. It wasn't blurry or distorted. In fact, the clarity was unsettling. The image was sharp, unnervingly crisp, but that wasn't what made Sarah freeze. No, it was the fact that the face in the photo looked almost exactly like her. Her breath caught in her throat. She blinked, rubbing her eyes as though trying to clear the fog from her vision, but the image remained the same. A woman in her early 20s, with the same brown hair, the same skin tone, the same facial features, stared back at her from the screen. The photo seemed almost too real, like it had been taken just moments before, yet the woman in the picture seemed so unfamiliar. Who's this? Sarah thought, her pulse quickening. She zoomed in on the image, desperately searching for some clue, some indication that this was a mistake, some way to prove that it was a glitch or a bizarre coincidence. But the longer she stared, the more she became convinced. This was no coincidence. This was something otherworldly. Her hands were shaking now, her mind racing. She closed the tab, but nothing happened. The page wouldn't disappear. She tried clicking the back button. Again, nothing. The screen remained frozen, the woman's face still staring back at her, almost with an accusatory look. Her heart was pounding now, the sound of her own heartbeat filling her ears as the air in her room seemed to grow heavy, suffocating. A cold sweat began to form on her forehead as she desperately tried to shut down the browser, but her computer wouldn't respond. Something was very wrong. The website wouldn't let her go. The familiar feeling of fear deepened into something far more primal, dread. She started feeling like she was being drawn into something much darker, something she wasn't supposed to see, let alone interact with. The woman's face remained on the screen, her empty eyes seemingly following Sarah's every movement. Suddenly, a new message popped up on her screen. "You shouldn't have clicked, Sarah. It's too late now." Sarah's heart stopped. How did it know her name? Her mouth went dry as she quickly scanned the room, her eyes darting from one corner to the other. Her stomach churned, and the hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. It was then that she realized something even more terrifying. The message wasn't coming from the website at all. Her phone buzzed on the desk. Slowly, almost against her will, Sarah reached for it, her trembling fingers unlocking the screen. A notification popped up, and her stomach dropped. It was from an unknown number. "Don't click again." Her blood ran cold. As if to add to the overwhelming sense of terror, the lights in her room flickered and dimmed, casting long, eerie shadows that seemed to grow and stretch across the walls. Her breathing grew shallow as panic set in. She quickly grabbed her phone, trying to find the contact information for the number that had sent the message, but when she checked, the message was gone. All that remained was the screen, dark, void of any explanation. Her hands were slick with sweat, and her mind raced for an explanation that made sense. It had to be a prank, a cruel joke. Yet, as the moments ticked by, the fear gripping her grew stronger. The shadows in the corners of her room seemed to creep closer, as if the very walls were closing in on her. She turned back to her laptop, her fingers numb as she clicked through the browser tabs once again. But when the screen loaded, it was no longer a website. It was her room. Her bedroom, the same one she was sitting in, but from a strange, distorted angle. And standing in the corner of her room, just out of the reach of the camera's view, was the woman from the photo. Sarah couldn't breathe. Mark sat in his cramped apartment, his eyes fixated on the glowing screen of his laptop. He had always been fascinated by the concept of time travel. Ever since he was a child, he had dreamed of visiting the past, witnessing history firsthand, or seeing the future unfold before his eyes. It was a fascination that had followed him into adulthood, where he now worked as an engineer. The more he learned about the theoretical side of time travel, the more he became obsessed. But it was always just that, a theory. Until tonight. The post appeared on a Reddit thread titled, "I'm a time traveler, ask me anything." At first, Mark thought it was just another hoax or elaborate prank. He had seen hundreds of similar threads, people pretending to be from the future, claiming to have knowledge of things that hadn't happened yet. But there was something about this one that felt different. It wasn't flashy or over the top. It didn't try to grab attention with wild claims or flashy promises. Instead, it was quiet, simple, and it was marked as verified. Mark clicked on the post, and his eyes scanned through the content. It wasn't a long read, but the messages were unnervingly precise, with hints of scientific detail that he hadn't expected. The poster, who went by the name Future_Traveler, spoke of technological advances, world events, and discoveries that seemed too accurate to ignore. The post even included specific dates, places, and times, things that Mark had no reason to believe were fabricated. The more he read, the more the hairs on the back of his neck stood up. There were small details that unsettled him. For example, the thread mentioned a scientific breakthrough that Mark knew would not happen for another 5 years, along with details about a specific project that had not been publicly announced. The poster even referenced people who hadn't yet gained recognition, though their names were known to Mark. The tone of the post was oddly personal, almost as if it was directed specifically at him. Mark tried to shake off the uncomfortable feeling in his chest. It's a scam. It has to be, he thought. But the more he analyzed the information, the more intrigued he became. Can this be real? Mark muttered to himself, clicking through to the user's profile. There were no personal details listed. No history. Just a single post, "I'm a time traveler, ask me anything." The profile picture was blank, an odd silhouette with no distinguishing features. It could have been anyone, but there was something about the tone of the post, the precision of the information, that didn't sit right with him. He thought about it for a moment, then made a decision. What's the harm? He clicked the reply button and typed a message. If you're truly from the future, tell me something no one else could know. He hesitated before hitting send, feeling a little foolish for indulging in something so obviously absurd. But to his surprise, within a minute, the reply came. You were just about to sign a contract for a project that will change the world. Don't. It will ruin you. Mark's pulse quickened. His fingers hovered over the keyboard as a cold sweat began to bead on his forehead. He stared at the screen, unsure how to respond. He had just been about to sign a contract for a new engineering project that would take his career to new heights. The fact that someone knew about it, someone who claimed to be from the future, was unsettling. He glanced at the clock, 3:13 a.m. The room around him felt unnervingly still, as though the quiet of the night was pressing in on him. The walls seemed to close in, the hum of his laptop the only sound. This is ridiculous, he thought. This isn't possible. Someone's playing a sick joke. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, that there was something more to this than a simple online prank. His fingers shook as he typed another message. How do you know about the project? This time, the response was quicker, almost too quick. I see you already signed it, Mark. You're in too deep. It's not just the project that's going to change the world. It's you. And the world won't survive the man you're about to become. Mark recoiled from the screen, his breath catching in his throat. His mind raced. He had signed the contract earlier that day, without a second thought. The project was set to revolutionize the industry, and he had felt like he had secured a breakthrough moment in his career. But now, with the chilling words flashing on his screen, his excitement was replaced with dread. Could this really be true? Could he have unknowingly signed up for something that would destroy him? He closed his laptop, a wave of panic flooding over him. His mind couldn't process what had just happened. No way. It's just an elaborate hoax, he tried to convince himself. But the message stayed with him, gnawing at his thoughts. The implication was clear. If this was real, if this was truly a message from the future, then something terrible awaited him. But as he stood up to walk away from his desk, he noticed something out of the corner of his eye. On the screen of his now-shut laptop, a new notification appeared, a small pop-up in the corner of his screen. It was a new message, sent only moments ago. I warned you. His heart stopped. Mark quickly opened his laptop, but this time, the screen was no longer just displaying the Reddit thread. The browser window had shifted, and what he saw next caused his blood to run cold. The website he had been browsing just moments ago was gone. In its place was a single line of text. You cannot undo what you've done. You will never escape the consequences. Mark's hands were trembling as he tried to close the window, but it wouldn't respond. He tried restarting his computer, but it was frozen. The message stayed on the screen, mocking him, taunting him. Suddenly his phone buzzed. He glanced at the notification, another message, this time from an unknown number. It's already started, Mark. There's no turning back. Don't say we didn't warn you. The words felt like a cold slap to his face. He stood there, motionless, staring at the screen, his mind racing. How did they know? The sense of dread was overwhelming, suffocating. What did I sign up for? The room seemed to grow colder, the air thick with unease. Mark could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him, the heaviness of a decision made long before he had even realized what it would lead to. He had always dreamed of having an impact, of changing the world with his inventions. But now, with every second that passed, he felt like he was spiraling deeper into a nightmare he couldn't escape. As the minutes dragged on, Mark tried to make sense of the situation, but there was no rational explanation. He glanced at the time, 3:35 a.m., and realized that the night was slipping away, leaving him in a state of paralysis. The thread, the messages, the warning, all of it felt too real to be a coincidence. And yet, Mark couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something far worse was waiting for him in the future. He stood up from his desk, trying to shake off the dread that had settled deep in his chest. He paced back and forth, his mind unable to quiet the storm of questions and fears that raged within him. Every detail of the post, every message, was etched in his mind, taunting him with the idea that his future might not be his own to control. The phone buzzed again. Mark stared at it, but this time, he didn't want to check. He knew, deep down, that whatever awaited him on the other side of that screen would only make things worse. His hands were cold, his thoughts tangled, as the dark reality of what he had done began to settle in. Was this a warning from the future? Or had he just fallen into the trap of someone playing a very dangerous game? Either way, one thing was certain, he had to figure it out before it was too late. Lily sat cross-legged on her bed, her phone glowing in the dim room. It had become her nightly ritual. She had struggled with insomnia for years, and despite trying various methods to fall asleep, nothing seemed to work. That was until she discovered the meditation app. It promised deep relaxation, calming sounds, and peaceful sleep. At first, she was skeptical. How could an app on her phone really help her sleep better? But after a week of using it, she had to admit, something about it worked. The soft, soothing voice guiding her through the sessions, the ambient sounds of nature, and the promise of rest was more than enough to lull her into a deeper sleep than she had experienced in months. Tonight, she opened the app once more, the familiar interface popping up on her screen. She noticed the dark, calming colors that filled the background, the soft chimes signaling the beginning of the session. She selected the Deep Sleep program, a new feature she hadn't tried yet. She could feel the weight of the day, the stress, the tiredness, settling on her shoulders as she prepared to relax. Her eyes closed as she pressed play, the sound of gentle rain filling her ears, mixing with the soft whispers of the app's voice. It felt familiar. The voice guided her to take slow, deep breaths, and she did so without thinking, sinking deeper into the mattress as her body began to relax. The calmness was almost immediate. For the first time in weeks, she felt like her mind wasn't racing, like the constant swirl of thoughts wasn't there. The soothing sounds created an almost dreamlike atmosphere, one where everything felt distant and irrelevant. The app's voice was calm and reassuring, speaking in a way that felt personal, like it was tailored just for her. "Feel the weight of the day melt away," the voice said, its tone soft and hypnotic. "You are safe, you are calm. Let your body relax completely." Lily's breathing slowed. Her muscles, once tight with tension, started to release, and she felt the heaviness of the day lift. She couldn't remember the last time she had felt this at peace. As the session continued, the voice spoke again, gently urging her to focus on her breath. She followed the instructions, sinking deeper into the trance. The world outside of her bedroom seemed to fade away, leaving just the sound of the rain, the voice, and the rhythmic pulse of her own heartbeat. It was easy to let go. She felt her body relax further, her thoughts becoming softer and more distant. It was as if she was floating in a void of calm, suspended in time. But just as she was beginning to drift off, something shifted. The voice, which had been so comforting, started to change. At first, Lily thought she was imagining things, but there was a subtle shift in tone, an unsettling undertone that she couldn't quite place. "Lily," the voice said, its sweetness replaced by something colder. "You are safe, but not for long." Lily's eyes snapped open, her heart pounding in her chest. The rain on the app's soundtrack continued, but there was a new tension in the air, something she couldn't explain. Her hand hovered over the screen, ready to turn the app off, but something kept her there. It was as if her body didn't want to move, as if the voice was holding her captive. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing thoughts, but the app continued its eerie lullaby. "Lily, don't fall asleep tonight," the voice repeated, now distorted, almost like a whisper coming from the other side of the room. The words sent a chill down her spine. She sat up in bed, the room suddenly feeling colder, darker, as if something had shifted in the very fabric of the space around her. The voice on the app had never sounded like this before. It had always been soothing, calming, almost angelic. Now it was a far cry from that. It sounded like a warning, or worse, an order. She hesitated, glancing around the room as if expecting to see someone standing in the corner, watching her. But the room was empty, and yet, the air felt thick with a presence she couldn't see. She picked up the phone, her hands trembling, and tried to pause the app, but the screen didn't respond. The app was frozen, the play button stuck, as if it were mocking her. She tapped the screen again, harder this time, but nothing happened. The voice continued, now more frantic, more insistent. "You're not safe here, Lily. Don't sleep. Not tonight." Panic began to rise in her chest. She glanced at the time, 2:43 a.m. She had been using the app for over an hour, but it had felt like mere minutes. Her breathing became shallow, her pulse quickening. She felt like the app was inside her mind, controlling her thoughts, bending her will. She couldn't move. The voice was all she could hear. "There's no escape, Lily. You can't leave now." The words seemed to wrap around her like invisible chains, tightening with every passing second. Her eyes darted to the bedroom door, the only exit, but it was as if the room had become a prison. Every sound in the house now seemed amplified, the ticking of the clock, the rustling of leaves outside, the hum of her fridge. It was as if her entire world was closing in on her. The app's voice grew louder, more urgent, its tone shifting from calm to something more sinister. "It's too late for you, Lily. You've already opened the door. You can't close it now." She jumped out of bed, her body moving on autopilot. Her hands were slick with sweat as she gripped the phone, trying one last time to turn off the app, but it was as if the device had a mind of its own. The rain sound was growing louder, filling the room like a storm was brewing, and the voice, oh, the voice, now seemed to surround her, coming from every direction. She slammed the phone on the bedside table and stumbled to the window, ripping open the curtains and staring out into the dark night. The streetlights below glimmered like ghosts, casting long shadows across the pavement. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, yet everything felt wrong. The air felt thick, suffocating, as if the night itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. With a frantic movement, Lily grabbed her jacket from the chair and rushed out of the room. She needed fresh air. She needed to be away from the oppressive presence that the app had brought into her life. Her feet carried her down the hall, her heart pounding as the voice continued to echo in her mind, "Don't go to sleep, Lily. You're not safe." She burst into the kitchen and quickly yanked open the door to the small balcony. The cool night air hit her face like a slap, the rush of it clearing her mind for a brief moment. She closed her eyes, trying to focus, trying to steady her breath, but the unease in her chest wouldn't go away. It was as if something was waiting for her, watching her from just beyond her line of sight. She turned, expecting to see someone standing there, but there was nothing. Just the night. Just the sound of her breathing. But then, the unmistakable vibration of her phone on the table inside the apartment caught her attention. It was enough to make her blood run cold. It buzzed again. Lily stepped inside and picked up the phone. The screen was still cracked with the paused app's dark interface. But now, a new notification flashed on the screen, a message from the app. She couldn't breathe as she stared at it. "You didn't listen, Lily. You should have stayed asleep." The words seemed to burn into her mind, making her head spin. The sense of unease, of something lurking just beyond her reach, intensified. The walls of her apartment seemed to close in on her as she stared at the notification, unsure of whether to laugh at how ridiculous it was or scream at the sheer terror now gripping her. Either way, she knew this was only the beginning. Something was watching her, something that had control over her now. Jason had always been fascinated by the darker side of the internet. He was a tech enthusiast, always looking for new programs, apps, or websites to explore. His friends often teased him about his obsession with conspiracy theories, urban legends, and the more obscure corners of the web. But Jason didn't mind. It was his thing and it was thrilling. He'd stumbled across countless dark web forums, hidden websites that promised to show the world's most disturbing images, or maybe even the unexplainable truths that others were too afraid to face. Yet, Nothing had really grabbed his attention like the website he found one fateful evening. It was a random link, something he found buried in a Reddit comment, posted by someone with a username that meant nothing. At first, the website looked like any other shady, unregistered page. A blank white background, with a series of numbers flashing across the screen in a rhythm that reminded Jason of a heartbeat. Below the numbers was a simple message: "Welcome to the deepest part of the web. Click at your own risk." He hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to expect. But something about it called to him. Something about it felt different, darker, more dangerous. He knew he should close it, but curiosity won out. He clicked. The page changed instantly, the numbers replaced by a single image. A photo of a man standing in the middle of a street, with no one around for miles. The photo was strangely unsettling. The man's face was obscured, a blur of shadow where his features should have been. He wore a simple black coat, standing perfectly still. But there was something about the emptiness around him that made Jason feel uneasy, like the space in the photo was suffocating. The caption beneath the image read, "The man who never existed. Not in this world, not in any world." Jason's pulse quickened. He leaned in closer to the screen, squinting at the image. He clicked the mouse, expecting the page to load more images or explanations, but instead, the website remained still. The photo stayed in place, like it was frozen in time. For a moment, he felt the urge to look away, to close the tab and pretend he hadn't seen anything. But again, his curiosity overcame his hesitation. He clicked again. This time, a video appeared on the screen. It started abruptly, without any warning. Jason could barely process the image at first. A room, dimly lit, with shadows moving in the corners. The figure in the video was the same man from the photo, but his features were now clearer. His face was just as blurred as before, yet there was a strange, empty quality to it. He was standing in the center of the room, staring directly into the camera with those indistinct, dark eyes. The man's expression was hard to read, but there was something unmistakable about the way he looked at Jason. It felt like he was aware of Jason, aware that he was watching. Then the video cut to black. Jason blinked, unsure of what he had just witnessed. His mind raced, trying to make sense of the image. His heart was beating faster now, his senses on edge. He leaned back in his chair, feeling a wave of discomfort wash over him. This is ridiculous, he thought. It's just some staged video. A hoax. Nothing to worry about. But as much as he tried to convince himself, the unease in his stomach remained. He wasn't ready to stop, though. Jason clicked once more, as if the act of doing so would somehow relieve the tension building in him. The next page was different, darker. It was a simple text document, but as he read the words, Jason's blood ran cold. The text read, "You have opened the door. There is no turning back now." It was a warning, sure, but it felt real. It felt like the words were meant for him, like he was being pulled into something far beyond his understanding. His mind spun, trying to find a rational explanation. It's all part of the experience, he told himself. A game, a thrill. But deep down, Jason couldn't shake the feeling that he was no longer in control of the situation. That the website wasn't just some strange corner of the internet. It was something else entirely. Something far more dangerous. The screen flickered and the text changed. "I've been waiting for you." Jason felt his chest tighten. Who was the I in the message? His fingers hesitated over the keyboard. His mouse hovered above the back button. He could leave now, escape the discomfort, go back to his life. But something inside him pushed him forward. He clicked again. This time, the page shifted once more. But it wasn't just another image or text. It was a live stream, the kind Jason had seen on obscure forums before. It was grainy, flickering, and the audio was distorted. But what struck him immediately was the scene. The man, the same faceless figure, was standing in a dark room, and behind him, the door was wide open. Jason could hear a low, almost inaudible hum in the background, like some kind of electronic noise, a static buzz that rattled his nerves. The figure stood perfectly still, like he was waiting for something or someone. As Jason watched, his heart thudded in his chest. The camera zoomed in slowly on the man's face, and for the briefest moment, it seemed like the blur of his features shifted. Jason couldn't quite make out the details, but it was as if the face was beginning to take form. The thought made his stomach churn. Was this real? Or was it just an elaborate trick? He tried to tell himself that it was fake, that it was all just an illusion, but the sense of dread that crept up his spine told him otherwise. The video paused for a moment, the figure on screen still, motionless. Then, just as quickly, a message popped up in the chat on the stream: "You've seen too much. It's already too late." Jason's breath caught in his throat. What does that mean? He thought. What have I gotten myself into? Suddenly, the figure in the video moved. It wasn't a slow, deliberate motion. It was almost mechanical, as if it were no longer human. Jason's eyes widened in horror as the man turned his head, slowly, deliberately, until his eyes were locked onto the camera. The effect was unsettling. The figure seemed to be staring straight into Jason's soul, as though it knew exactly who was watching. He froze, unable to tear his eyes away from the screen. The figure's lips parted, and for the first time, Jason heard a voice, low, raspy, and filled with malice. "You shouldn't have come here," the figure whispered. The words sent a jolt of fear straight through Jason's body. His instincts screamed at him to close the page, to turn away, but his body didn't respond. He was paralyzed, caught in a trance, unable to look away from the screen. The figure's expression remained unchanged, its eyes unblinking, fixed on him with an intensity that felt far too real. And then, as quickly as it had started, the video cut out. The screen turned black. Jason's heart pounded in his chest, his breath coming in short, ragged bursts. He sat there for a long time, staring at the empty black screen, trying to process what had just happened. Had it been real? Or had he fallen into some twisted, interactive game that someone had created for their own amusement? But the questions only made him feel more uneasy. He looked around the room, half expecting the figure from the video to appear in the corner, standing silently, watching him. He grabbed his phone and checked for any messages, any notifications that might reassure him that everything was normal. But there was nothing. Just the stillness of the room, and the echo of his own racing heartbeat. Then his phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. "Stop looking. It's too late. You've seen him." Jason's blood ran cold as he stared at the message. His hands shook as he put the phone down, trying to fight the panic rising in his chest. There was no turning back now. He had opened the door. He had stepped into something that he couldn't escape. And the worst part was, he knew it. He could feel it. Something was coming for him. Something far darker than he could ever have imagined. Ella had always been someone who sought solace in the ordinary. She liked routine, the comfort of predictable moments. After the chaos of her teenage years and the constant upheaval that had come with it, she found peace in the mundane. A hot cup of tea, the soft hum of a quiet evening, the reassuring click of a television remote. It was in the small things that she felt she had control over her life. Her apartment was a haven of tranquility, a place where she could unwind after a long day and forget about everything else. But that peace was about to be shattered in a way that would change her forever. It all started when Ella came across an obscure link in an online forum, buried beneath pages of random conversations. She was used to scrolling past these things, dismissing them as spam or irrelevant posts. But for some reason, this one caught her eye. The title was strange. The never-ending call. Dare to listen? Something about it intrigued her. The curiosity gnawed at her, making it hard to ignore. What could it be? Some sort of prank, maybe? Or a creepy story, like the kind that was often shared around Halloween? Without thinking too much, Ella clicked on it. The page opened, but it wasn't what she expected. Instead of the usual article or blog post, there was a single image, a faded black and white photo of a phone with a vintage rotary dial, its cord tangled and disheveled. The background was a dimly lit room, the kind that looked like it hadn't been touched in years. On the screen, there was a short message: "Pick up the phone. Hear the truth." Beneath that, a countdown began, ticking away steadily, each second dragging on longer than the last. Ella stared at the screen for a moment, feeling a strange sense of unease building within her. Was this part of the experience? She thought. A challenge? A game? Her heart skipped a beat. Something told her that this was different from the usual internet oddities she came across. She had always avoided things like this, but tonight was different. Maybe it was the fact that she'd had a particularly exhausting day, or maybe the idea of something unusual happening excited her, even if it made her a little uncomfortable. The thought that something mysterious might happen, that she might uncover something new, was tempting. Without another thought, she clicked the play button at the bottom of the screen. The countdown stopped, and for a moment, there was silence. Then, the phone on the screen began to ring. The noise was faint at first, like an echo from far away. But as the seconds ticked by, it grew louder, more insistent. Ella's eyes widened. It wasn't a sound that was coming from her computer speakers. It was real, like it was coming from somewhere else. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up as she looked around her quiet apartment. The phone in the image was the same vintage style as the one her grandmother had used, the one she'd always been told was broken and had no dial tone. The ringing became louder still, louder than any phone call she'd ever heard. It was as if the noise was coming from inside her head. Suddenly, her phone, the one lying innocently on the coffee table, buzzed. Ella froze, staring at the device. Her breath caught in her throat as she wondered whether this was part of the game, or if it was something more. But she felt a deep, unsettling feeling in her gut. The phone continued to ring. Her fingers shook as she reached for her phone, her instincts telling her not to answer, to ignore the call and disconnect from the weirdness unfolding around her. Yet there was a part of her, something darker, that urged her to pick it up. It's probably nothing, she reasoned, just someone playing a prank. With trembling hands, Ella pressed the green button to accept the call. At first, there was only static on the other end. A low, hissing noise, like the sound of a radio that was trying to tune into a frequency that wasn't quite there. Her pulse quickened, and she instinctively pulled the phone away from her ear. Then, a voice came through, barely a whisper at first, but growing clearer with every word. "Ella," the voice said, barely audible, as if it was struggling to make itself heard. Her heart skipped a beat. Her name. It was as if the voice knew her. But it was wrong. It sounded wrong. Faint, like it was coming from far away, and yet, there was something so eerily familiar about it. Something that sent an icy shiver down her spine. She wanted to hang up, but her body wouldn't respond. Her fingers were glued to the phone, frozen by fear. She felt an overwhelming sense of dread flood over her. "Who's this?" she wanted to ask, but the words stuck in her throat. "Ella, you shouldn't have done that," the voice continued, now clearer, the words dripping with a kind of ominous certainty that made her stomach churn. "You don't know what you've unleashed." Her breathing quickened. Her mind raced. "What do you mean?" She wanted to scream, but the words never left her lips. She felt as if she were trapped, unable to move, unable to speak. The voice continued, relentless and cold. "You were always meant to find it. The call. The truth. Now you'll see what happens when you answer." Ella's skin prickled with an eerie, electric chill. She wasn't sure whether it was the coldness of the apartment or the terror creeping under her skin. She tried to hang up, but the phone wouldn't let her. The connection was still there, the voice still speaking to her, still reaching into her, pulling her further into the unknown. "The phone never stops ringing, Ella. You're never alone. You'll hear it again always." Her fingers were slick with sweat, her grip on the phone tightening with each passing moment. She desperately tried to press the red button to end the call, but it was useless. The voice's words felt like they were sinking into her mind, embedding themselves deep inside her thoughts. The fear in her chest grew, expanding like a balloon that was about to burst. "You've opened the door, Ella. And now it's too late. You'll never escape it." And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the voice cut off, leaving a silence that felt impossibly heavy. The buzzing on the other end of the line persisted for a few moments, but the voice was gone. The call had ended. For a moment, Ella sat there, her phone still pressed to her ear, staring at the empty room around her, unable to comprehend what had just happened. She wanted to throw the phone across the room, to run out of the apartment and never look back. But she couldn't move. She couldn't bring herself to do anything but sit in the stillness, her heart pounding in her chest. The phone in her hand buzzed again. Her breath caught in her throat as she glanced down at the screen. It was a new message, but it wasn't from a number she recognized. "It's not over. You've opened the door, and now you'll hear the ringing forever." Her stomach dropped. The words lingered, and the message didn't seem to want to leave her. She couldn't explain it, but it felt like it was a warning. The phone buzzed again. Another message. "Answer. The call will always be there. And so will I." Ella dropped the phone onto the table, her hands shaking uncontrollably. It was no longer a prank. It was something real, something alive. The room felt colder, darker, and she could almost hear it, faint, distant at first, but growing louder with every passing second, the ringing. The door had been opened, and there was no turning back. Nina had always considered herself a skeptic. She didn't believe in ghosts, didn't buy into conspiracy theories, and dismissed most of the weird, unsettling things she heard online as mere urban legends or elaborate hoaxes. After all, she was a woman of logic, of science. If there was no evidence, then there was no reason to be afraid. So when her friend, Maria, mentioned an old, obscure website she had stumbled upon, a site with the simple yet chilling name, The Whispering Void, Nina rolled her eyes and laughed it off. Maria, always drawn to the strange and the mysterious, was convinced that the site was something more than just another online oddity. But Nina wasn't interested. Until she saw the video. It was late at night when Nina, unable to sleep, found herself aimlessly scrolling through her phone. The soft glow of the screen illuminated her face as she scanned through social media posts, reading articles, checking emails. Then, almost as if by some unseen force, her fingers stopped on a post. It was a link to the very website Maria had told her about. The Whispering Void. You won't be able to stop watching. Read the post description, and beneath it was a warning. Once you click, there's no turning back. Nina chuckled to herself. Of course, this was just another clickbait ad, one designed to play on people's natural curiosity. But still, something about it nagged at her, that same feeling she couldn't explain. Without thinking much about it, she clicked the link. The website opened in an instant, its page simple, almost minimalist. The background was black, with just a few words flashing across the screen. "Welcome to the Void." There was no other information, no instructions. Just the words, sitting there in stark contrast to the emptiness of the page. Nina frowned, expecting to see a glitch or a 404 error. But then, almost as if it had a mind of its own, the page shifted. A single video appeared, its thumbnail nothing more than a grainy image of a dark corridor, with a flickering light at the end. The title of the video was unsettling in its simplicity. "Watch carefully. The truth is hidden." Nina hesitated, her logical mind telling her to close the window and move on. But the truth was, she felt a strange pull toward the video. "It's just a video," she told herself. "Nothing more than a creepy short film. She could handle it." She had watched horror movies that were far worse than this. With a deep breath, she clicked play. The video began with the same dimly lit corridor that had appeared in the thumbnail. The camera was shaky, as though someone was holding it and moving quickly through the space. The walls of the corridor were cracked, the paint peeling away in places, and the only light came from a flickering bulb hanging from the ceiling. It was an unsettling scene, one that reminded Nina of a haunted house attraction, artificial, yet somehow disconcerting. But as the camera moved deeper into the corridor, things began to feel off. The shadows didn't behave the way they should have. The light flickered erratically, casting strange, jagged shapes on the walls. And in the distance, Nina could hear something, a soft, almost imperceptible whisper. It was so faint that Nina wasn't sure if she was imagining it. But as the camera moved closer, the whispering grew louder, more distinct. It was a voice, but not one she could understand. The words sounded like they were being spoken in a language that was just on the edge of comprehension, a language that seemed to distort the very air around it. "What is this?" Nina thought, feeling the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. But still, she couldn't bring herself to stop the video. She was mesmerized, drawn in by the eeriness of it all. As the camera moved through the hallway, the whispers became clearer. It wasn't just one voice now, it was many, layered over each other, creating a low, haunting murmur that seemed to reverberate in Nina's ears. The camera finally stopped at a door at the end of the corridor, its frame warped and old. It was ajar, just slightly, as if something, or someone, was waiting behind it. The whispers were now unmistakable, growing louder, almost frantic. Nina felt her chest tighten. The sense of dread that had slowly crept in now felt like a heavy weight pressing down on her. The figure behind the door wasn't visible yet, but the camera's lens focused on it. Nina's breath caught in her throat as the door creaked open, the whispering becoming so loud it was almost deafening. At the very moment the door opened fully, the camera snapped forward, revealing a figure standing in the darkness of the room. The figure was tall, cloaked in black, its face hidden beneath a shadowy hood. Its presence was overwhelming, but it didn't move. It just stood there, unmoving, watching. Nina's heart pounded. This isn't a movie, she realized. This isn't just some art piece. This is real. The whispering continued to grow, and then, in a voice that sounded impossibly close, the figure spoke. "You shouldn't have come here, Nina." Nina's blood froze. She couldn't breathe, couldn't move. The figure knew her name. It knew who she was. It was impossible. It was just a video. But the words had been so clear, so direct. She thought, how does it know me? Before she could process what was happening, the camera jerked back, as though whoever was filming had turned to run. The whispers escalated into a cacophony of voices, all shouting at once, their words incomprehensible, their tones frantic, desperate. The camera moved erratically, the shaky motion making Nina feel dizzy. The darkness seemed to close in around the figure, until it was all that remained. The video ended abruptly with a single, final whisper, "Now you belong to the void." For a moment, Nina sat in stunned silence, the darkness of the screen reflecting the chaos that had erupted inside her. Her pulse raced, her mind struggling to process what she had just seen. She shook her head, trying to make sense of it. It couldn't be real. It couldn't. This was just some elaborate trick, some incredibly well-done piece of horror fiction. Yet, the lingering sense of dread, the inexplicable fear that crawled up her spine, told her otherwise. She glanced at her phone, her fingers trembling. She was about to close the window when a notification popped up on her screen. It was a message from an unknown number. The text was short and simple, but it hit her like a punch to the gut. "You've seen us. You've opened the door." Nina's breath caught in her throat. She stared at the message, her mind racing. This can't be real. This is insane. She immediately tried to block the number, but the message wouldn't go away. It kept reappearing, as if it was trying to burn itself into her memory. With shaky hands, she grabbed her phone and opened her contacts, only to find that the number was unregistered, with no name attached. The message wouldn't stop. "You've opened the door. You've seen us. Now you're ours." Panic surged through her as she frantically scrolled through her phone, looking for anything that could explain what was happening. But there was nothing. No answers. Only more messages, more warnings. The dread settled into her chest, cold and heavy. She couldn't escape it. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her, waiting for her to make the next move. The question gnawed at her. What happens now? And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, her phone rang. Nina jumped, the sound echoing in the silence of the room. The screen displayed a simple message: "Answer the call. There's no escaping the void." Her hand shook as she reached for the phone, and for a moment, she hesitated. Should she answer? What would happen if she did? The last message had felt like a threat, a warning. But the phone continued to ring, louder, more insistent. It was as if it were calling to her, beckoning her into the darkness. Finally, with trembling fingers, she answered. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then, in a voice that sent chills down her spine, the figure from the video spoke again. "You should never have opened the void, Nina. Now you'll never leave." The line went dead. Nina stared at the phone, her heart pounding in her chest. The world around her seemed to close in, the room growing darker. There was no escaping it. The void had found her, and now, there was no turning back. It had been days since Nina first stumbled upon the whispering void, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She didn't know how to explain it, but ever since that night, she had felt like she was being followed. Her every move seemed watched. Her phone, the same one that had received the cryptic messages, buzzed with an eerie regularity. At first, she dismissed the notifications, telling herself that it was just some elaborate hoax, that someone was playing a cruel joke on her. But deep down, she knew the truth. Whatever had been unleashed that night was real. She couldn't sleep. She couldn't eat. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the figure from the video, the tall, cloaked figure standing in the shadows, watching her with those hollow, soulless eyes. And the whispers, they never stopped. They were there in the back of her mind, a constant hum that she couldn't escape. No matter how loud the world around her became, the whispers were always there, growing louder with each passing day, until they began to invade her waking moments. It wasn't just the whispers, though. It was the feeling that someone, something, was in the room with her. The shadows in her apartment seemed to stretch unnaturally, twisting in ways that defied logic. She would hear faint noises when no one else was around, footsteps behind her when she was alone in the kitchen, a soft tapping on the walls that made her heart race. Sometimes she thought she saw fleeting figures out of the corner of her eye, but when she turned to look, nothing was there. It was as if she were being haunted by an invisible presence, one that was just out of reach, waiting for her to make the wrong move. The first time it happened, she had dismissed it as her mind playing tricks. She had gotten up in the middle of the night, needing to grab a glass of water. As she passed through the living room, she caught a glimpse of something in the reflection of the window, a figure standing just outside her apartment, its form indistinct in the darkness. But when she turned around, there was no one there. It wasn't until the second time, when she saw the same figure standing in the hallway, that she realized she wasn't imagining things. There was someone, or something, watching her. Nina's anxiety reached a boiling point when the phone calls began. At first, they were just random numbers. No name, no information, just a string of digits that she didn't recognize. But each time she answered, there was nothing on the other end. Just silence. She tried blocking the numbers, but they kept coming, relentless, like they were being made by some unseen force that knew no boundaries. The voice from the video, that low, haunting whisper, kept echoing in her mind. "You've opened the door. Now you'll never escape." She tried to tell herself it was all in her head, that she was being paranoid. But every time she looked at her phone, the notifications seemed more urgent, more desperate. And when she went online, she found that the website, the Whispering Void, was gone. It had disappeared, wiped from existence as if it had never been there in the first place. Yet the effects of it lingered, as if the site had never truly vanished at all. It was as though the very fabric of reality had been altered the moment she clicked on the link. It was as though the shadows that had once existed only in the corners of her mind had now come to life, and they were stalking her. Days turned into weeks, and Nina found herself sinking deeper into a sense of dread. She couldn't go anywhere without feeling like she was being watched. The sound of her own heartbeat seemed too loud, too real, and the whispering would never leave. She started seeing things, shadows darting across her apartment when she wasn't looking, figures standing just behind her in mirrors, their faces hidden in darkness. She couldn't even walk down the street without looking over her shoulder, convinced that someone was following her, that the presence she couldn't shake was growing closer. She tried to contact Maria, to ask for help, but when she called her friend's number, it went straight to voicemail. Maria didn't respond to her texts, and Nina felt a rising sense of panic in her chest. It was as if the world around her was slowly closing in. The walls of her apartment seemed to shrink, the air grew thicker, and even the daylight felt oppressive, as though it were trying to suffocate her. One night, after another fruitless attempt to reach Maria, Nina sat at her desk, staring at the empty screen of her laptop. She had been up all night, her mind racing with thoughts she couldn't escape. She felt like she was losing her grip on reality, like she was being pulled into a world that didn't make sense. And then, without warning, her phone buzzed again. Another notification. She glanced at it, her heart sinking as she read the message. "It's time to answer the call." Her breath caught in her throat. Her body went cold, the weight of the message pressing down on her chest. This was it, the moment she had been dreading. The door was open, and whatever had been lurking behind it was about to step into her life. She had tried to resist, had tried to ignore it, but now she knew. She couldn't escape. Not anymore. Nina stood up, her legs shaking beneath her. She walked to the door of her apartment, her hands trembling as she gripped the handle. She couldn't bring herself to leave. She was trapped. Trapped in her own mind, trapped by the things she had seen, by the things she had opened when she clicked on that cursed link. The whispering seemed to grow louder, more insistent, and her mind began to spin. She didn't know if she was still in the real world, or if she had crossed over into something far darker. All she knew was that she couldn't breathe, couldn't think clearly. Then her phone rang again. She picked it up, her hand shaking, and without thinking, she pressed the answer button. "Hello?" she said, her voice barely above a whisper. For a moment, there was silence. Then the voice spoke. "You shouldn't have answered. You've made your choice." Nina's stomach lurched. It was the same voice, the voice from the video. The one that had haunted her dreams, the one that had whispered in her ear every time she closed her eyes. It was here. It was real. She tried to hang up, but the call wouldn't end. She slammed the phone down onto the table, her heart racing, but the ringing continued. Why won't it stop? She thought, her mind spiraling. The walls of her apartment began to close in on her. The shadows seemed to stretch, growing longer and darker. The temperature in the room dropped, and she could see her breath misting in the air. The whispers were deafening now. Everywhere. In her ears. In her mind. "You shouldn't have opened the door. Now you're ours." Her vision blurred. The room around her seemed to twist and distort. She stumbled backward, her legs giving out beneath her. She collapsed to the floor, her body trembling, as the whispers continued to circle her. The darkness was alive, breathing, moving around her. She couldn't escape. And then, just as quickly as it had all begun, the whispers stopped. The phone was silent. The room was still. Nina lay on the floor, gasping for air, too afraid to move. But she knew. She knew that she would never be the same. Whatever she had opened that night, whatever she had brought into her life, was not going to let her go. The door had been opened. And now, there was no escape. The nights had started blending together for Nina. Each day seemed to crawl by, dragging her deeper into a suffocating haze of dread and paranoia. No matter how many times she told herself it was just in her head, that she was imagining things, the truth lingered in the corners of her mind like an ever-present shadow. The whispers were no longer confined to the moments when she closed her eyes. Now, they seemed to follow her wherever she went, whispering in the rustling of leaves outside her apartment window, in the hum of fluorescent lights at work, in the silence of the night when she tried, unsuccessfully, to sleep. It wasn't just the voices. It was everything around her that had shifted. The apartment she had once considered a sanctuary now felt foreign, almost hostile. The walls felt too close, the rooms too dark, even during the day. She would find herself staring at the corners of the room, convinced that there was something there watching her, something just beyond her line of sight, lurking in the shadows. Sometimes, when she passed by the mirror, she could have sworn that her reflection wasn't quite right, that it was lagging behind, like it was trying to catch up to her movements. It was as though she were becoming detached from her own reality, her sense of self slowly dissolving. Nina tried to make sense of it all. She'd scoured the internet, looking for answers, for any explanation that could rationalize what she was going through. But there was nothing that could explain the images she saw in her mind, the sensations that clawed at her sanity. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was a deep, gnawing emptiness, an all-consuming sense of something being off. Every time she thought about the whispering void, the feeling intensified, as though the sight, the presence behind it, had become a part of her now. She couldn't go back to it, not after what had happened. Not after the voice had told her she had made a choice, and that there was no turning back. The phone calls had stopped, but the silence felt more suffocating than the relentless ringing. The messages had stopped appearing, but the unease remained, festering in the corners of her thoughts. Yet it was always there, the temptation to return, to look again, to confront whatever it was that had invaded her life. One morning, Nina woke to the sound of a soft knock on her door. Her heart jolted in her chest, a sense of unease settling over her like a heavy cloak. She glanced at the clock, 7 a.m. It was early, too early for any kind of visitor. She hadn't been expecting anyone. For a moment, she froze, unsure of what to do. Who could it be? She wondered, her mind racing with possibilities. Could it be someone from work? A neighbor? A delivery? She hesitated, the dread from the past few weeks pressing down on her. The knocking came again, louder this time, more insistent. Nina stood up slowly, her legs unsteady beneath her. She approached the door with caution, peering through the peephole, but all she could see was a shadow standing outside, obscured by the angle. She didn't recognize the figure. Her heart raced as she considered whether or not she should open it. What if it's one of them? The thought crossed her mind like a bolt of lightning. What if they've come for me? In a moment of panic, Nina rushed to the window, peering out through the blinds. There was no one in sight. The street was empty, the cars parked neatly along the curb. She checked the peephole again. Still no one. She felt a wave of relief wash over her. Maybe she was just overreacting. Maybe it was some random person, maybe a delivery mistake. But then, a soft voice came from the other side of the door, one that sent a cold shiver down her spine. "Nina," it whispered, barely audible. "It's time." Nina's blood ran cold. The voice. It was the same voice, the one from the video, the one that had haunted her since the night she clicked on that cursed link. She stepped back from the door, her mind spinning. How did they know her name? How did they find her? The voice continued, low and coaxing, like a soft caress that made her skin crawl. "We've been waiting for you. You can't hide forever." Panic surged through her. She grabbed the phone, her fingers trembling as she dialed the number for building security. She wasn't sure what she expected to happen, but the idea of calling for help was the only thing she could think of. As the phone rang, her mind raced. Her apartment was on the 12th floor. There was no way someone could just appear outside her door without her seeing them. But still, the voice persisted, growing more urgent. "Nina, don't ignore us. You're ours now. Come out and play." Just as she was about to speak into the phone, the voice cut off abruptly. The silence that followed was deafening, leaving Nina breathless and frozen. Her phone rang again, this time with an unknown number. She stared at the screen, paralyzed by fear. Her pulse hammered in her ears as she stared at the phone, unsure of what to do. Finally, with shaking hands, she answered. "Hello," she whispered, her voice trembling. There was a long pause, and then the voice returned, softer, but no less chilling. "It's not over, Nina. It never will be." The phone line went dead. Nina's heart pounded in her chest. She dropped the phone, her hands shaking uncontrollably. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed onto the couch, gasping for breath. It was real. It had always been real. The presence, the whispers, it wasn't just some figment of her imagination. She had opened something that she couldn't close, something that wouldn't let her go. Tears streamed down her face as she curled up on the couch, trying to escape the suffocating grip of panic that had taken hold of her. The room felt smaller, the air thinner, and she realized, with growing dread, that the walls were closing in. The whispers were louder now, echoing in her ears, almost like they were coming from inside her head. Suddenly, the door handle rattled. Nina jumped, her breath catching in her throat. She stared at the door in terror. The knocking started again, softer this time, like a rhythmic tapping, like someone was tapping their fingers against the door. "Nina," the voice came again, low and insistent. "You can't hide. You can't run from what you've awakened." Nina stood, her legs unsteady as she moved toward the door. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to open it, to face whatever was on the other side. She didn't know how long she could keep running, how long she could pretend this was just a bad dream. She had opened the door to the void, and now it was too late to close it. The whispering grew louder, filling her ears, drowning out everything else. The figure, the one that had haunted her dreams, stood in the hallway. She could feel it, even if she couldn't see it. She could feel its presence pressing against her, suffocating her. "It's time, Nina," the voice whispered. "You're ours now." And for the first time, she didn't resist. She didn't fight it. She opened the door. There was nothing left to do.